Okay, the first of two government failures which you can talk about on your exam that you can link to efficiency and resource allocation is price floors, and the particular one we're going to talk about is minimum wage. You could also use this if they ask you, one way the government intervenes in the labour market and how that leads to inefficiency. So essentially the government sets a price floor in the Australian labour market, and that price floor is that you can't pay people under a certain price. The minimum wage is currently at $18.29.29, and it applies to full-time workers who are 21 years or older. So that's well above rates in other countries. For example, in America it's just over $7. In the UK it's around £6.7, which is equivalent to about $13. The minimum wage is designed to protect workers with weak bargaining power. So make that really clear in your answers what they do it for. So it's designed to protect those with weak bargaining power from exploitation from the government. It's a safety net for those to make sure that those on minimum wage are above the poverty line. However, the problem is that the minimum wage does not take into account the labour market conditions and is not very flexible in terms of how strong the labour market is at a particular time. So in a free market, wages will be set at equilibrium by the forces of labour or demand and supply. When there's more demand for labour, the price of labour will go up, and when there's more supply that exceeds demand, the price will go down. Workers' wages and conditions would be individually negotiated between a worker and his or her boss, and without government intervention. This leads to some workers being paid wages that could not support a dignified standard of living. So again, the minimum wage is designed to protect that dignified standard of living. The aim of the minimum wage is to protect workers with weak bargaining power, to provide a safety net for low paid wages, to avoid exploitation of employees by profit-seeking companies, which would occur in a free market. It increases the reward or incentive for employment, and should help to boost participation as well. So the idea is that you're going to get at least a certain amount of income, so you're less likely to be on welfare benefits and more likely to work. And it provides equity, but it also helps to boost technical efficiency in that we're using more of our available labour resources. Unfortunately, the minimum wage has led to several undesirable consequences that reduce efficiency in the allocation of resources. And the main reason for that is that the minimum wage is not flexible and does not take into account the strength of the economy at that particular time. So, in terms of technical efficiency, why is the minimum wage bad for technical efficiency? The minimum wage can lead to undesirable consequences, including high levels of unemployment. So we know technical efficiency is about being on the PPF. If we've got high levels of unemployment, we're not at our productive capacity, and we're not essentially using the most of our resources. So when the minimum wage is set above the market clearing wage, so that's the wage that would exist in a free market, that can lead to more supply than demand for labour. So what happens is that many people that are willing and able to work are unable to get employment because the minimum wage is too high. So if you're doing a demand and supply diagram, I'll just do it over the top, there's your supply of workers, there's your demand. If we set the minimum wage here as a floor, you've got supply here, you've got demand here, and that's essentially a surplus of workers, which is another word for saying there's unemployment. So the key thing is that it leads to high levels of unemployment. Many people that are willing and able to work are unable to get employment. This is an inefficient allocation of resources because there's valuable labour not being used in the production process, and it causes the country to work inside its PPF and not maximising their volume of production or satisfaction. So technical efficiency is about hiding unemployment, not working to our PPF, valuable labour resources going to waste. In terms of allocative efficiency, the key things you can link it to here, so again, and this goes to any question when you're doing questions on technical and allocative efficiency. Technical, think about where we are in relation to our PPF. In terms of allocative efficiency, you can link it to higher prices, reduced competitiveness, reduced education, we'll talk about that in a sec, and higher trade deficits. So the high minimum wage effectively reduces the purchasing power of many Australians whose wages are determined by normal market forces. So due to the high minimum wage, we pay more because the cost of production for businesses are higher, and that can hurt allocative efficiency because we pay more for things like groceries and clothing and entertainment because of higher production costs. Increased wages can also make local firms less competitive compared to other countries, so that can lead to a reduction in international competitiveness. We export less, import more, and again that flows on to increased unemployment. So you've got higher prices, we've got reduced international competitiveness. Some businesses may be forced to close or relocate because they can't keep up and they can't be competitive with the high cost structures. This leads to higher unemployment that would have existed without the minimum wage and put increased burden on the taxpayers that are still in work because of the higher welfare. Businesses working on Sundays may be obliged to pay penalty rates, so they may not be able to compete as well. And this all reduces our international competitiveness. Okay, and this is the trickiest probably bit of the whole lot of it. The minimum wage distorts the price mechanism. And what that means is wages should be reflective of the demand and supply in any particular market. So there should be a big gap between the wages available in an industry that doesn't have a lot of demand for their services and compared to those that has a lot of demand that you need to be skilled to work in that profession. So the problem is that a high minimum wage can distort the gap or reduce the gap between those on unemployment, those on the minimum wage, and those that are slightly more skilled in the workforce. So by increasing the wages of those professions covered by the minimum wage, the relative wage difference is smaller between skilled and unskilled professionals. This can lead to labour resources not going to their best source. So there's less incentive to get a training or an education because you know, oh, hey, I can still earn $18.23 an hour on the minimum wage. Is it really worth me doing that extra training course to get, say, a wage of, say, $20 an hour or something like that? If there was no minimum wage, then you might be getting $10 if you're unskilled, $20 if you're a little bit more skilled. That gap of $10 would be a big incentive. So the key thing is that because it distorts the price mechanism, it may lead to an under-allocation of scarce labour resources to certain professions and people not developing the skills and training and education that they should. Okay, and fourthly, it reduces dynamic efficiencies. Okay, the labour force is less responsive to changes in demand. When demand for certain products falls, resources may not shift as quickly out of that industry as they are still protected by the high minimum wage. So if you're working in an industry where people don't really want what you're producing anymore, you might keep working there because you know you're going to get the minimum wage anyway. Okay, so to sum up, in terms of the minimum wage, we've got one, it leads to unemployment. That's bad for technical efficiency. Scarce resources are not fully utilised. It's bad for allocative efficiency because it leads to higher prices, reduces our international competitiveness. And the main thing there you want to talk about is that it distorts the price mechanism. So people may not get the training and education because they know they're going to get protected by the high minimum wage anyway. And in terms of dynamic efficiency, when there's less demand for products, resources or labour resources may be slower to move out of that industry. In the long term, and for inexperienced, unskilled workers in younger age groups, where the demand for labour is fairly elastic, wage rises do appear to cause unemployment. Okay, don't worry too much about this. This is some specifics. We'll skip that. So, in terms of structure of answers with the minimum wage, what was the intention? Increase the wage of low-income earners, boost their purchasing power, improve allocative efficiency by showing more citizens have access to goods and services. The problems or the unintended consequences, employers become more capital intensive, they sack workers because it's costing them too much, high unemployment, less purchasing power, which is the opposite to what it is intended. And secondly, it distorts the price mechanism. There's a smaller gap between those on the minimum wage and those with higher skilled professions, so there's less incentive to get education or training, which hurts efficiency as well. To summary, higher prices, reduced international competitiveness, reduced allocative efficiency. Okay, an answer, government failure is a situation where government intervention fails to improve the allocation of resources or actually makes the allocation of resources less efficient compared to the free market outcome. Define what it is. Define what an efficient allocation of resources is that maximises our welfare. The minimum wage is designed to protect workers with weak bargaining power. Explain what the aim of it is. And the problems that can occur include higher unemployment, not technically efficient, increased production costs, increased prices, a less skilled society, and reduced allocative efficiency. One other question, with reference to the labour market, explain how government intervention in a competitive market might lead to government failure and an inefficient allocation of resources. So explain why the government intervenes, how it might lead to failure, and why it might lead to inefficiency. So again, following through, governments generally intervene in the market in order to improve the efficiency of allocation of resources. An example is the minimum wage. They do this to protect workers that have a weak bargaining power, so it acts as a price floor. This raises the cost of labour. Okay, so they do it in order to protect workers, as I just said. This situation raises the cost of labour and might lead to an increase in the level of unemployment as businesses' costs of production increase, resulting in a decrease in the demand for labour. Therefore, the lower level of demand will cause unemployment and lead to a less efficient allocation of resources, production will be reduced and efficiency will fall. I encourage you to talk about the price mechanism as well and that disincentive to get skills. Thank you.